So Disney just took a look at the fact that I was going to do other stuff with my day today and went, nah, no you're not. A frankly insane number of announcements came out from Disney's, I guess it was a shareholders meeting, or did they hold it? I don't even know. There's a ton of stuff, is my point. This included trailers, teasers. Now, if you want to see me actually react to those trailers, there's a video over in the break room of me doing that with, the Marvel stuff, because most of the stuff that they had for other things were just minor teasers, logo reveals, behind the scenes stuff, which doesn't interest me as much, and I don't feel like I have as much reaction to give about it. But I've got a list of stuff to go over and to talk about these things specifically, and also some of the bigger ideas about what some of this might mean or whether or not I think it's a good idea. So I have to break this down in a lot of ways. Let's start with Marvel. Let's start with the MCU. Now, we had trailers for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, Loki, What If, and a sort of a behind-the-scenes trailer for Ms. Marvel, but that barely counts. The trailers were all solid, looked good. Obviously not the first one for WandaVision. We now have a firm date for WandaVision in January when it's going to be released. They all seem pretty good. Again, you can go to the video I linked earlier for reactions to those. But all of those were things we already knew about, and we already knew were happening. Couple of other bits of news. In relation to Ms. Marvel, they did confirm that the character of Kamala Khan, I'm wavering now because I went back and forth, is it Kamala or Kamala? But on the teaser thing, they pronounced it Kamala. So I'm sticking with that for now. They did confirm she's going to appear in Captain Marvel 2, which makes it immensely obvious that they're keeping her sort of fangirl tendency towards the Avengers and Captain Marvel in particular. That sort of thing, and this ties into some of the other stuff that's going on as well. They are integrating much more tightly the stuff going on in Disney Plus and the stuff going on in theaters. And normally I would be either cautious or would not take that very seriously. But things have kind of changed. I'll come back to that. They confirmed that Black Panther 2 will not recast the part of T'Challa. They didn't say how the story would move forward, nor did they say whether or not they would acknowledge the character as being dead, but they did confirm they are not recasting Chadwick Boseman. And they're also not moving the production date. So whatever they thought to do, they think they can do it in the same amount of time they had to do it before. Doctor Strange is going to end up tying into both WandaVision and the as-yet untitled third Spider-Man film. So they really are getting into the multiverse thing, which is another thing that I've expressed a lot of caution about before. And I'm going to be nervous about always and forever. But I think if there was ever a time where it was going to work, it kind of makes sense now. Because having done a fairly large, more or less continuous, everything fits together story that ultimately culminated in Endgame, you're probably never going to top that for a single coherent narrative. So if you were ever going to splinter off and start exploring alternate versions of things and bringing in the idea of different universes and bringing in that sort of thing, this is a good time to do it because it shakes up what you're able to do without trying to outdo what you did before in the same kind of way. So I'm a little bit more open to the idea than I have been. I just hope that they never use it to, say for instance, bring back Tony in another, I understand he could still be alive in another dimension, but just even tackling that takes the power out of his death. And I also hope that they don't start having a new dimension for every single franchise. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't dabble in the multiverse unless you have to, if you're going to have it at all. But we'll see. We'll see how that all ties together. There were announcements of a number of shows, all coming to Disney Plus, obviously. There's going to be Secret Invasion, which is going to feature both Nick Fury and Telos, the Skrull played by Nick Mendelsohn. Ben Mendelsohn. I don't know why I said that. Oh, because I said Nick Fury first. That's why. But in any case, this is going to kind of pick up from the teaser that was at the end of the second Spider-Man movie, which kind of ties into what I was saying before about them interweaving these things a heck of a lot more than they were previously. Again, I'll come back to that as a general concept once I go over all the MCU stuff. But, taking on that story or some version of Secret Invasion, like even if any of these titles resemble titles from Marvel comic lines that have happened before, don't expect a direct adaptation. Marvel has almost never done that. So they've also announced Ironheart, which was the spinoff for the character of Riri Williams, who is a black woman who develops an Iron Man suit, I think, in the comics under Tony's tutelage. Now, obviously, Tony is gone, so they'll have to find a different way to integrate her in. Now, we don't have a lot of details on this one, but they have announced the actress who is cast, who is someone named Dominique Thorne, who is not an actress I'm familiar with, but we do have that much going on. They have announced Armor Wars, starring Don Cheadle's War Machine. And again, that is a title taken from, I think, an 80s story from Marvel. It strikes me as a little bit odd that they announced both of these as separate entities. I would have thought, especially with Tony gone, integrating those two stories would have been a natural fit. But maybe they didn't want it to feel like Riri was playing second fiddle to War Machine, but at the same time, the character by her nature has always kind of been, a second, but not, I mean, I don't want to imply that she's not important or she's not a good character, but she is a derivative character by her nature, so I'm not sure there's a way around that. If they pull the actual Armor Wars story, any part of it, it's about the Iron Man technology falling into the wrong hands, the sort of thing that Tony always dreaded, which would be a very natural pickup for something like War Machine to go out and to deal with. And again, would have fit with introducing Riri. I don't know. We'll have to see how it pans out. I'll be curious to see how they make these two series feel fundamentally different when they're basically both Iron Man spinoffs. I don't know. That each individually, I'm like, cool. But the fact that they're both happening and they're separate things, that confuses me slightly. There's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special in 2022 ahead of the actual proper Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which will be the year after that. Additionally, there is going to be a series of I Am Groot shorts. I didn't see that they confirmed it was animated, but that's my presumption. And they also confirmed Tatiana Maslany, best known for Orphan Black, will be playing Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk. This has been rumored for a while, but was never confirmed up to this point, so we now do have that. I couldn't find anything that they confirmed how they are going to realize it, and whether they are going to CGI her as She-Hulk, much like they do with Mark Ruffalo. Who's also going to appear in the series, by the way. But much like they do with Ruffalo for Banner. The only reason I've ever questioned that is because that's going to be expensive for a TV series, and it would potentially severely limit how often they could show her as She-Hulk. So I've always kind of wondered if they would do something else, either use perspective tricks or just use the old idea from the old 70s Incredible Hulk TV show and have two different actors. I doubt that at this point. Because if you get someone with the talent like Tatiana Maslany has, that would feel like a waste if all you had was her dubbing over another actress as She-Hulk. But that's all the details we got there. For films in the MCU, I told you there was a lot of stuff. For films in the MCU, there's going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So obviously they're going to keep exploring the quantum realm, and that would not surprise me if that ends up eventually tying into the whole multiverse thing as well. And that's also going to introduce Jonathan Majors, star of Lovecraft Country, as the villain Kang the Conqueror, who is an interesting choice. Kang is one of those characters who's very complicated and convoluted, but I'm not sure is actually very interesting, which actually might make him a good fit for a story that's probably going to lean a bit more lighthearted and silly, because as a villain, Kang is kind of silly and has never really made sense. And pretty much everybody's coming back. They've confirmed that Paul Rudd is coming back, and Evangeline Lilly is coming back, and Michelle Pfeiffer is coming back, and Michael Douglas is coming back. So they're all coming back, and they have a title, and they have a villain. Cool. So overall thoughts about the MCU. There's a pretty good variety of stuff here, and obviously a lot of the focus right now is on the TV series going on Disney+. This really does show that Disney has a plan to handle the film separate from the TV series, whereas we're watching Warner Brothers make its announcements that it's basically dumping everything, at least for 2021, directly onto HBO Max, and we're seeing some very bad fallout from that. Whereas Disney seems to be very careful about keeping the film announcements as film announcements. Now, that's not to say that none of those will end up going to Disney Plus, but I think definitely the hope is for them that by the time these films get made, that things might have cleared up enough that they can release them to theaters. And that means that they're making a bunch of stuff actually tailored to the platform of Disney Plus, and that's with all the series. So this feels very well thought out. For as many things as there are, it does not feel like throwing everything out the wall and see if it sticks. Now, in terms of the integrating of the films with the series, that's always something I've been really skeptical about before, because we learned pretty much immediately with the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that the connections were always going to be really superficial, and it was the same with Daredevil. There were references and tiny acknowledgments in the series of the movies, never the other way around. A couple of things have changed, though, since then that makes doing so at least a slightly more viable option, although I'm still not sure it's a great idea. So part of the problem before was all the television stuff was under Ike Perlmutter, who is a big wig at Marvel. I think at this point is basically really only doing the actual publishing of the comics at this point. But he and Kevin Feige, who is in charge of the movies, of course, they do not get along at all. And Feige basically wrestled control of Marvel from Perlmutter in terms of everything that is movies and television. Perlmutter used to handle TV, and that was part of why trying to coordinate Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with anything was such a pain in the butt. And of course, the stuff over on Netflix involved a complete other company that Disney did not have direct control over as well. Whereas now, Feige is actually able to exert direct control over basically everything except Spider-Man, and Sony seems willing enough to play ball that he's probably got a good hand in that as well, which means that it is now much more viable to coordinate things and actually integrate things more tightly, because you don't have to worry about things falling apart later, and especially on a binging platform like Disney Plus, where you can be certain that at the very least an entire first series of something will be filmed, and you don't have to worry about, oh, we're going to set all this stuff up, but then we got canceled, or heck, we got canceled halfway through the season. No, you shot the whole thing, so you know what's going to happen, so you know how to integrate it. That's all very viable. My concern, and this has always been my concern, more people watch the movie than watch the TV shows. So I still think it's a bad idea to make enjoyment of the movies dependent on knowing what has gone on in the TV shows. I think if they go that far, and they're really borderlining it at this point, if WandaVision is going to somehow feed into the Doctor Strange sequel, which is supposed to be a theatrical release, exactly how they do that, I think, is in many ways going to be the canary in the coal mine and the test bubble for, are they going to be able to do this in a way that does not require every single person who likes the movies to also watch the shows? Because you might think, oh, well, they'll sell more subscriptions to Disney Plus that way, and they will for some of them, but I would bet money that they will lose more audience who go, this has gotten too complicated, I'm done, than they will gain people crossing over from the movie over to Disney Plus. Again, we'll have to see how this actually plays out to see exactly how much they're integrating it, and then see whether or not my fears are justified. I have a suspicion that the integration is still largely going to be in one direction, primarily the movies influencing the shows, minimal the other way around. That is still my expectation, but we'll see. And that could have been the whole video, but now we got to talk about Star Wars. Oh my God. Okay, so we have a couple of movie announcements. The big one being Rogue Squadron, which is going to be directed by Patty Jenkins, who directed the 2 Wonder Woman movies, which, first off, in terms of the timing, this probably wasn't planned, but it feels like a big middle finger to Warner Brothers and all the mess that they're dealing with right now. A quick recap. When Warner Brothers announced that they were putting their entire slate of 2021 movies day and date in theaters and on HBO Max at the same time, they pissed off a lot of people. They pissed off their major studio partners, such as Legendary. They pissed off individual creators like Denis Villeneuve, who directed Dune, and Christopher Nolan, who Warner Brothers has had an amazing working relationship with. And now the Directors Guild of America is holding talks with the studio, and it is distinctly possible that if they don't reverse course or come to some sort of agreement, that the Directors Guild will bar its members from working with Warner Brothers, which would really screw them. Like, that's how badly Warner Brothers has handled this whole thing. But anyways, the reason I brought that up is because Patty Jenkins jumping ship from Warner Brothers and Wonder Woman over to Disney and Star Wars, I don't think was planned as a reaction to everything going on, but the timing definitely worked in Disney's favor. So anyway, Rogue Squadron, which I think had a lot of spin-off material. I know it mainly as a video game, but this is the kind of thing that I would kind of like. This was why I was excited about the idea of the spin-off movies, and ended up really liking Rogue One, not really liking Solo because it was a bad idea. But the idea of exploring specific elements of Star Wars, because the movies, they have a bit of everything. You know, they have the rollicking adventure and the Jedi and the political stuff and the large-scale battles and the space dogfighting. You make something like Rogue Squadron, you can narrow it down to a narrow focus and really drill into some of these things with things like the pilots and the X-Wings and things like that. And that is an idea that excites me. We'll see if it works out. They don't always. Taika Waititi is still working on a Star Wars film. That is confirmed that he's still doing that. No title yet, no concept yet, just that he's doing it. Whole bunch of series were announced. So let's go through these. We have confirmation of Obi-Wan Kenobi, finally, which has been rumored forever, and is going to see the return of both Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, and is going to be set between episodes 3 and 4, which is more or less what we all suspected, although I don't know how many people called that Darth Vader would actually show up. And it seems like the main thrust is going to be like Jedi hunters, hunting down the stragglers that weren't caught up in Order 66, was it? But that's a pretty bog standard plot. Presumably it'll be set mostly on Tatooine, which, if that is the case, is going to make it interesting to see how they differentiate it from The Mandalorian, which, granted, wasn't set exclusively on Tatooine, but has leaned very heavily into the vibe that desert settings give it. So I'll kind of be curious to see what they do there. There's going to be a spinoff for Ahsoka, coming off of The Mandalorian. Will star Rosario Dawson. No surprise. I think pretty much everybody expected that as soon as it was announced that she was going to play the character at all. So that's not particularly surprising. That's a very natural extension of what they were going to do. Rangers of the New Republic, which I don't even know. Apparently Jon Favreau's behind this one, and it's set in the same timeline as The Mandalorian. With The Mandalorian appearing to have gone down a lot better with the core fan base than, say, The Last Jedi or certainly Rise of Skywalker did, they seem to really be leaning hard on The Mandalorian settings and everything that went on there, which makes sense but feels very reactive, which makes me nervous. I'll kind of come back to my overall thoughts later. Confirmation about Andor, which is going to star Diego Luna's character from Rogue One. We already knew that was in the planning, so that's moving forward. Awesome. And I'm down for that. Again, a different element of Star Wars than we're used to seeing. And, we've seen the noble soldiers and the pilots and the Jedi. We haven't really seen the spies, the ones who have to fight dirty for the rebellion, because they must exist. Otherwise, the rebellion would have been crushed a long time ago. So drilling into somebody like Andor is, I think, a really solid idea. So I'm down for that. Okay, there's going to be something called Acolyte, which is coming from Leslie Headland, who made Russian Doll for Netflix, which I haven't seen, but I've heard pretty good things about. And that is apparently going to be set in the High Republic era of Star Wars. Not that it actually matters all that much, because the technology and general feel of Star Wars doesn't change almost no matter when you set it. Old Republic, High Republic, New Republic, the Empire, the only thing that seems to change is the political situation. The technology never changes, and the general feel of the world doesn't alter significantly. So, I don't know. It's part of why I never really got into the whole expanded universe. I'd pick up something that's set 1,000 years before Star Wars and open it up, and there's laser guns and spaceships and lightsabers. I'm like, so there's literally nothing changed in 1,000 years. Okay. Anyway, my hang up. I don't really know what to make of that, though. I need to see a teaser or trailer, or more of a concept than what we've got. Bad Batch, which is a spinoff from the Clone Wars series, which I still haven't watched, haven't had the time. I barely have the time to record this. So presumably that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know enough about Star Wars to know how these characters sort of resonated and fit into everything, but hey, good for them. Something called Star Wars Visions, which is going to be a series of animated shorts, and I'm already questioning that title because the fact that you are releasing a show called WandaVision and also Star Wars Visions, I'm like, somebody in marketing should have gone, okay, somebody needs to change their title, because it actually did confuse me. Maybe I'm just dumb, but I mean, animated Star Wars shorts is fine. Okay. And there were a few other Lucasfilm projects. They teased a new Indiana Jones still with Harrison Ford, which I don't know if I can get excited about. And not just because of Crystal Skull, but just because, look, I like Harrison Ford and he's still got it. I do genuinely think that when I see him and stuff even now, but like, the torch has to get passed at some point, doesn't it? Apparently he's going to be directed by James Mangold, who's a very solid director and a good pick if Spielberg's not going to do it. So, I mean, that's something. They also teased Willow, which is going to be a follow-up series to the movie being on Disney+. I am bizarrely excited about this. Willow, I think, is a really underappreciated movie. And if you're not from my generation, you probably don't really know much about it at all. But I really enjoy it. I think it's a cool world. And it is a world that already has a lot of follow-up material to draw from, because there was, I think, a trilogy of novels written by Chris Claremont based off George Lucas's ideas for what would have been sequels. Now, that's not to say that the Willow series has to be a direct adaptation of those. It absolutely doesn't have to, but there is existing material for it to draw ideas from and forge its own path, which to me puts it on solid ground to move forward. And it's also the kind of thing that feels like more of a passion project, because Willow was never big enough for this to feel like a cash-in. You know what I mean? And finally, from Lucasfilm, something called The Children of Blood and Bone, which is based off a novel by, I'm probably going to butcher this, I apologize, Tomi Adeyemi, which I know nothing about this book, but it seems like an interesting idea, dealing with a young African girl trying to reconnect with, if I understood it properly, sort of ancestral magics. It's a neat idea, but again, I really know nothing about it. So, talking about the overall plan for Star Wars, comparing it to Marvel, as the word I already used it is, this feels much more reactionary, whereas Marvel's, it feels like this was more or less always the plan. I mean, maybe there's a few more Disney Plus series now than they would have been thinking initially because, pandemic. But Star Wars really does feel purely reactionary, purely, okay, things haven't been going quite right. What can we do that people will like better? And it inherently makes me more nervous about it, because when you do something as a reaction to what's going on, I'm not going to say that can never work out, but you're trying to catch up to what people want as opposed to forging your own path and seeing if people come with you. So as far as the specific things go, I'm more nervous about this many shows set in Star Wars than I am about how many Marvel shows there are, because the Marvel shows can have very distinctly different feels. I mean, just look at the trailer for Loki and then Falcon and Winter Soldier for a comparison. Those feel like completely different things in terms of tone, in terms of setting, in terms of just everything, visual presentation, the works. Star Wars has generally gone for a lot more visual consistency, and because they have yet to really properly branch out and look at the world outside of the conflicts between either the Sith and the Jedi, or the Rebellion and the Empire, or the First Order and the they weren't even the Rebellion anymore. I don't know. Whatever they called the Rebellion that time. You can see the new trilogy has faded from my head. But though, and that conflict is functionally identical to Empire versus Rebels, there isn't as much variety. And I'm much more worried about oversaturation of Star Wars than I am of oversaturation of Marvel, because there's a lot more opportunity to do wildly different things with Marvel properties. And they haven't really found a way to do that with Star Wars. It all still has to, quote unquote, feel like Star Wars. About the farthest they've gone afield is something like The Mandalorian, which has a smaller scale and, a bit more of sort of the Western lone wolf kind of thing going for it. But the overall world is still very much Star Wars. They have not found a way to grow and expand things in the same way. And that makes me nervous. As far as the specific things, I mean, honestly, there isn't really enough for me to get that excited yet about any of it, because we've got no trailers and we don't have a lot to go off of. I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi's probably the one that I'm the closest to excited about, just because I like Ewan McGregor in the role and I'm down for more of it. And that's kind of it, though. I think it says a lot about the state of where I am in terms of Star Wars overall. While I enjoyed the first season of The Mandalorian, I haven't watched season 2. I don't know when I will. But my overall feeling towards Star Wars is like, okay. I was kind of kind to the Rise of Skywalker when it came out, but it definitely didn't leave me wanting more of Star Wars afterwards. And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm feeling like I might be full. So I don't know if my feeling there is reflective of anybody else's, but that's just me. There was also a whole bunch of other stuff announced for other Disney properties, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I am going to highlight the ones that I found most interesting, or at least have something to say about. So Raya and the Last Dragon, that is going to hit theaters and streaming at the same time, day and date, theatrical and streaming. Now, as I mentioned, Warner Brothers doing the same thing in 2021 has gotten them into a lot of hot water. There's a couple of big key differences here with what Disney's doing with this film. The first is that they don't have to worry about pissing off a lower studio because it's their film. They made it, they're releasing it. So they don't have to worry about bungling relations with people outside of the studio, the way that Warner Brothers has managed to do. And the other thing is, this film is scheduled to release in March, which means it's early enough in the year that we are probably still going to be dealing with the pandemic at that point. Look, I know there's a vaccine and all that, but the rollout for that and the amount of time it's going to take to truly get as many people as need to be vaccinated properly and for things to even begin to go back to what they were, it's not going to be by March. Absolutely no way. And I think Disney knows that, but unlike Warner Brothers, who just wrote off all of 2021 in an effort to try and boost HBO Max because they're terrified of their new corporate overlords at AT&T, but with Disney, I suspect they're going to do a rolling thing with that. And they announced it for March because, yeah, things will probably still not be great in terms of theatrical film being released in March. And I expect, depending on how things clear up after that, they may or may not announce later films in the year as we get into May, June, July, and then the latter half of the year. They may continue to announce day and date as we go, depending on how circumstances are. And that's just a much smarter approach. Again, certainly in terms of not just throwing your whole slate under the bus. What else we got? Oh, there's going to be a number of spin-off series from various Disney and Pixar and etc. properties. There's going to be a Baymax series. There's going to be a Zootopia series. There's going to be a series for Tiana from Princess and the Frog. There's going to be a Cars spin-off series, a spin-off series about Doug, the dog from Up. Part of what frustrates me here is particularly the Baymax one, because I haven't actually liked really, I don't think any of the Disney or Pixar sequels all that much. I think the one I disliked the least was Frozen 2. I really didn't like Ralph Breaks the Internet, and I didn't get much out of Incredibles 2. But I have always wanted a proper sequel to Big Hero 6. Not a spin-off series, which has already had, and now a series about Baymax. Like, just give me a proper sequel. So, like, I'm a little spiteful about that in and of itself. As far as the others go, Zootopia honestly makes sense because they created this whole world, this whole city. There's a lot of crevices of it to explore. You don't even have to stick strictly to the police work of Judy and Nick, but even if you did, you can weave them in and out of a lot of different stories. So that actually makes sense as a series, I think. Tiana, I don't know. I kind of want to hear what the premise is. I don't know what you'll do with that. But then again, I also heard pretty good things about the Tangled series, and I wouldn't have known what you would do with that either. So, hey, what do I know? I mean, the ones spinning off from Cars and from Up, I mean, like, I never really liked Cars, but I know it's always been a big moneymaker for them, so I guess that's not that surprising. The one about Doug is weird. Like, if that was announced as another sort of series of shorts, like I Am Groot, I'd get it, but like proper series? You sure about that? They also announced a number of upcoming Pixar films. Most of them, new stuff that we don't know a lot about yet. There's one called Red Panda, which is, fingers crossed, their first film directed by a woman. That was supposed to be Brave, but there were not enough clashes with that director that she did not see that film through to the end. So we'll see if that actually happens this time. There was another one that I can't even remember now. I didn't write it down. And then there's Lightyear, which is an origin story about Buzz Lightyear with Chris Evans voicing Buzz Lightyear. So I guess the premise is that what if Buzz was like real? What would his story have been? And I guess that's part of justifying not casting Tim Allen, because he would be the voice of the toy of Buzz as opposed to the voice of the real Buzz. I guess I need to see like a proper trailer, not just a teaser on this, because this is a concept that's making me go, you're just trying to wring out nostalgia dollars, aren't you? Which I think is worth mentioning about this whole slate of stuff. I kind of have mixed feelings about this because on the one hand, it feels like a lot, and it is a lot, but as most of it's going to Disney Plus, this is not dissimilar from a TV network announcing its slate of upcoming shows in a new season. It's kind of along the same line. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But at the same time, much more so than you would get from, say, a network TV show, almost all of it is spin-off or adaptation or in some way tied to existing property. There isn't a lot of original content on display, which in terms of like getting everybody on board with your service is probably not what you need anyways. But it does make me nervous how few properly original. I mean, like even some of the stuff that I didn't write down, like there's going to be a follow-up to The Mighty Ducks, for crying out loud. As much as I enjoy a lot of this material, the aversion to new ideas is starting to worry me. About the closest we're getting to new ideas, honestly, is the MCU stuff, because they are introducing a fair number of new characters, including a bunch that, didn't really show up in the announcements because there wasn't new stuff to talk about with them, with things like Moon Knight and things like that. But even those are still, as I said, getting more integrated and more tied into the other MCU stuff. So even that, even if it's introducing whole new characters like She-Hulk, like Kamala Khan, it still feels derivative and still feels like a spinoff. A bit less so than stuff like Lightning McQueen and Mater getting a series, but still, it worries me a little bit. But then again, this is kind of the state of the industry. They want guaranteed success, and banking on an existing name, tying it to something that you already know people like, that's risk avoidance. That's just what it is from a corporate perspective. So it is what it is. I feel like seeing the full list of everything just put that situation into much starker perspective than I think I've had in a little while. But, there was one other thing that I'm like, ooh. So they've put Noah Hawley, who is the creator behind Fargo and Legion, on a Alien series for FX. I am always curious to see what Noah Hawley does. So I'm on board for that. So I think that about wraps it up for me. Overall, I think certainly for the most part, this makes a heck of a lot more sense than certainly anything Warner Brothers has been saying lately. I feel like the MCU is the most carefully assembled lineup of projects. Star Wars, I need to see more about these things before I can really decide whether or not I'm excited about any of them. And then most of the rest of the stuff I don't have a strong opinion on because it's pretty much all aimed at kids and most of it doesn't really appeal to me. But again, worries me how much of it is derivative works. But there we go. I know that wasn't everything, but that's as much as I'm prepared to talk about. What do you think about any or all of what I've just gone through? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon, which is what pays my bills and allows this entire thing to keep going. Any amount you are able to give helps. There are perks at every support level, but you also don't have to. End of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.